Do you know this painful feeling when you have to cross a busy city center and it feels like all eyes are on you? Or that intense discomfort walking into a room full of people at a party that is already in full swing, like you're exposed, like you don't belong there? That's the quiet torment of social anxiety, and if you felt it, you're not alone. But what if it didn't have to be this way? What if you could feel calm, feel grounded, even confident in those same exact situations, and without having to fake it? In today's episode, I will break down the hidden trauma cycle behind social anxiety, and by the end, I will show you 2 powerful ways to begin breaking free from it for real. Ready? Let's do this together. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Robert, and if you're new here, I'm not a healthcare professional myself, but instead I share a client's perspective here on this channel. Let's start this video today with a quick recap of the last episode. There, we have uncovered something that's rarely talked about, and honestly, it changed the way how I see social anxiety. Because most people think that social anxiety is just about being shy or awkward or even introverted. But for so many of us, especially those who have experienced early emotional wounds, social anxiety is actually primarily about protection. Let me explain that. So if you grew up in an environment where you felt unsafe around other people, maybe you were criticized a lot, made fun of, ignored, or shamed for being yourself, then your central nervous system started to associate people with danger instead of connection. So instead of learning how to relax into social situations, you learned how to stay alert, to scan for threat, and to kind of even shrink because it overwhelms you. And that's not a personality trait, like for example introversion. This is a survival response learned as a consequence to protect you from traumatic experiences. Psych Central, for example, actually backs this up because they say in an article, if a person's primary diagnosis is trauma, the co-occurrence of social anxiety disorder increases to about 43%. So social anxiety and trauma seem to be very closely linked. And when you think about it like that, it makes total sense. You didn't miss out on confidence training here. No, you just adapted to a world that didn't feel safe. So if social situations exhaust you, if you often feel observed by others, or if your heart races when people look at you, it is not because something's wrong with you, it's because your central nervous system still thinks it needs to protect you. But the good news is, this cycle can be broken. And in today's episode, I will show you now 2 powerful ways to do exactly that and to make your nervous system feel more calmer. If you want to know how to finally break the cycle of social anxiety, let's understand the full circle first real quick. So the circle always starts with that symptom of social anxiety. Social anxiety usually leads to other symptoms related to it, like overwhelm, when you're around people, when people are too much. For example, when you are in a social constellation in a city center with friends in a relationship context, and then as it overwhelms you, it's too much for you, you need to withdraw usually. That's a consequence of social anxiety. And as you withdraw, you isolate, of course. That isolation also leads to a lack of nervous system adaptation. Let me explain that. When you never give your nervous system the chance to adapt to higher social exposure and to more social contact, you will always force your system to stay overwhelmed in a way and to keep withdrawing. Because the more you isolate, the more you will isolate. This is how adaptation within our bodies, also within our nervous system, works. As you have a lack of nervous system adaptation, that leads to more dysregulation and to always pushing you into the fight, flight, or freeze state. This is the state of the nervous system which is usually activated when you are under threat, when everything appears too much. And as you are dysregulated, in terms of your nervous system, you are in the sympathetic fight mode, flight mode, freeze mode. You also at some point have to shut down because you feel so unprotected and exposed. And this again then, of course, leads to more social anxiety. So that's the vicious cycle of social anxiety. And if you think that was already eye-opening and you can relate to that, now wait until you hear how to finally beat that cycle. Because in order to beat social anxiety and to calm complex trauma symptoms, we need to understand what's needed to do so. So what do other people who are not socially anxious have that we don't have? The simple answer is they feel safe around other people and in social situations. And how can we learn then to feel safer? Well, my second therapist explained to me two different approaches. I first want to introduce you to both approaches first in general, and afterwards I want to show you for each approach an idea on how to specifically beat social anxiety. So the two approaches are the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. Both lead to a regulation of the nervous system and create a feeling of safety. The top-down approach, that's always what you can do proactively to regulate your state from the outside. So things that give you kind of from the outside the ability to feel more calm and grounded. Those things are called re-regulation tools and skills. And then we have bottom-up approaches. Those create a perceived sense of safety from the inside. And those things are described as your autonomous resources. So things from inside the foundation, basically, of your mental stability. Let's start with the top-down approach for social anxiety. The good thing about this one is that you can start to practice it right now, today. So this is something you can do always. Not a lot of big practice needed, you just can start, compared to the bottom-up approach, which takes a long time and is basically the sustainable foundation for your mental health, as I said. But you know how it goes. Mental health and working on yourself always takes a lot of time. But for the top-down approach, in terms of social anxiety, this approach just begins with setting emotional boundaries. Here's why this matters. People with social anxiety often have very weak boundaries, not because they're flawed or something, but because at some point they learn that saying no or addressing their needs might lead to rejection, criticism, or even abandonment. So instead of protecting themselves in real time, they withdraw completely because withdrawing feels safer in a way. But here is the truth, the issue with it. Withdrawing isn't safely, it's avoidance. Real safety starts when you can stay connected to yourself while being around other people. And that's where practicing emotional boundaries comes in. This is where exactly you will break the cycle. Right here. When you feel unprotected, when you need to shut down, this is the latest moment where you will practice setting boundaries. And this is actually a way out to beat the cycle. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Robert, setting boundaries? Don't I distance myself then even more from other people? Or, man, I can't barely stay in the room without panicking. How should I now set boundaries? And you're right. At first it sounds a bit contradictory, because for someone with social anxiety, even sometimes being around people is already a big deal. So the idea of saying no, of asserting your own needs might feel completely overwhelming, like it would make things even worse in a way. So the task here is to definitely start small. Say no to the second round of drinks if you're already tired. End a conversation politely when you start feeling overstimulated. Pause before saying yes, just to make someone else happy. Each time you do this, you're not shutting people out, no, you're actually telling your nervous system, I'm here, I've got you, you don't have to disappear anymore. But here's the interesting part. To set a boundary, you need access to an emotion that a lot of people with social anxiety were never allowed to express. The emotion is anger. Not explosive reactive anger, also not the uncontrollable and primal anger that comes out of the sympathetic fight state when your nervous system is already in danger, but the clean protective anger, the kind that says, this is my space, I matter, I deserve to feel safe here. And every time you act from that place, even just a little, you will notice something shift, because you will feel stronger, you'll feel less anxious, you'll feel more grounded in your body, because confidence doesn't come from pretending to be someone you're not. It comes from knowing deep down that you're allowed to take up space. And by the way, as you continue practicing that will also increase your bottom-up safety. And if you want to practice setting emotional boundaries and not feeling so thin-skinned and exposed anymore, you can do so. I dedicated a full class with multiple courses on this topic on our premium platform, as well as the skill of expressing emotions like anger and communicating your needs. And I will show you how you can get access. Just go to understandable.net. Here you can start a 7-day trial, and then you will join our community. And here we have a bunch of classes, more than 30 online courses where I share everything that I collected during the past years of my journey. For example, right here, feeling and expressing your emotions, but also very important, the whole topic of needs plus setting healthy boundaries. And it starts with understanding the boundaries first. What actually are boundaries? Because to me, and I read this somewhere in a comment recently, boundaries were always just a vague concept. And I thought this is so relatable to me. I never truly understood before therapy what a boundary actually is. And therefore, I built a course on how to set boundaries, also exercises from my therapy experience and how to resolve people pleasing and those things that come along with the difficulties of setting healthy boundaries. Okay, now let's talk about the bottom-up approach, because to truly break free from the grip of social anxiety long term, you also need something deeper, something more internal. You need to, and that now might sound a bit weird, you need to feel bigger than the world around you. What do I mean by that? Well, when you have social anxiety, the world can feel huge, can feel overwhelming, and other people might seem louder, might feel stronger or more confident, and you might feel really small, like you need to hide, to shrink, or to disappear in a way, like a tiny kid who is suppressed by the rest of the world. And here's the thing. A core problem of social anxiety is often a really low self-worth and feeling decreased in self-confidence. So a solution to work through social anxiety long-term without faking confidence is to build more real confidence. And real confidence is always built through real positive experiences. For me, for example, this started when I launched this YouTube channel here, because suddenly I had a structure and a purpose. And I also somehow had a deeper connection to myself because I could express what's in here in a way, and other people would see it. So I felt seen and heard suddenly. And it wasn't just about the content creation itself here on YouTube. As I said, it was also something deeper, a feeling of embodiment somehow. And I started to feel more real, more grounded, more me, and I also started to somehow build more confidence from inside. The same thing once happened to me when I started to work out and to build muscle for the first time. I suddenly felt more confident. I perceived other people also seeing me differently somehow, and I stopped feeling like a small kid. In a way. And I heard something similar on a podcast as well once. There was this guy who struggled with social anxiety for years until he got into parkour, into free running. And for him, it wasn't just about the tricks, about the running, but it was a lot about feeling super comfortable and connected with his body. Through movement, he learned control and orientation and strength and all these kind of things. And he also found a community where he felt accepted in, like-minded people who gave him a sense of recognition and confirmation. While this is still something that happens on the outside, it also changed his inside. And slowly, also his nervous system began to rewire. And that's what bottom-up healing is all about. Because this isn't just about confidence itself. This is about authenticity. Because when you start to live in alignment with who you truly are, when your actions, your environment, your body, your voice all start to match your core nature and you get closer to yourself, you no longer feel so vulnerable around others. Other people also stop feeling like a threat because you finally become home to yourself and you got the confirmation from the outside world that what you're doing is great in a way and that you can express yourself safely. That's real healing down there. Joseph Campbell once said it best, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." So here's the question I want to leave you with. What makes you feel more like yourself? Find that thing. It doesn't need to be impressive, it just needs to feel true. And from there, everything begins to shift, I promise that. And if you are also looking for like-minded people who try to find what makes them feel more like themselves, I would like to remind you that we also have a premium community for exactly that. Because in our community, I share in more than 30 online courses my full healing journey. Also, as I said, I talk about connecting more to yourself, finding the right people for your healing, expressing and feeling your emotions, communicating your needs, setting healthy boundaries, and also becoming a healthier and more authentic version of yourself. You can access the community by starting a 7-day free trial. Just go to understandable.net, start your 7-day trial here. So was the full circle of social anxiety eye-opening for you? Do you believe that you can beat it with setting healthier boundaries and finding more to yourself? I'm curious what you think. Definitely leave me a comment below. If you want to support the podcast, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I see you in the next episode. Have a great and hopefully less anxious day.